if you look at the headlines right now, you're seeing AI data centers basically scrambling to connect to electricity grids.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge issue right now.
Right, and in places like Texas, they are sometimes just completely failing to get that connection.
Just hitting a brick wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then in like a totally different part of the world, you've got these massive cargo ships struggling to secure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
And then you have countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo completely rethinking how they process and, recycle critical minerals domestically.
Which is a huge shift.
Yeah. And those may sound like three entirely separate stories, but if you look closely, each one raises the exact same question for you. The issue is no longer just, whether a resource exists somewhere, but who can actually access it and under what conditions.
Right, because if electricity physically exists, but a data center cannot connect to the grid, or if a sea lane is right there on the global map, but a ship cannot safely pass, and if critical minerals exist underground, but they just cannot freely enter global markets, what exactly has become scarce?
Right.
That is the central paradox we are exploring today in this deep dive.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to answer that, we really have to fundamentally update our mental models.
Yes, I do.
We're all used to the old equation, right? Like scarcity equals not enough physical resources.
The oil well runs dry. Yeah.
Exactly. The mine is empty. But what our sources are pointing to today is a totally new reality. Like, we need to shift to a model where scarcity equals not enough usable pathways.
Yeah.
Pathways that convert those resources into actual accessible capacity.
Yeah, and to understand how those pathways become scarce, we really have to look at where the pressure is building up the fastest.
Right.
In the materials we're analyzing, specifically this framework looking at what's called a membrane gradient field, we are basically asking where pressure and delay and mismatched speeds are accumulating across global infrastructure.
Okay, let's actually define that term for the listener, because membrane gradient field sounds like something out of a graduate physics seminar.
It does sound pretty academic, yeah.
Right, like when I hear the word membrane, I immediately think of high school biology, like a cell wall.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a semi-permeable boundary, right?
Yeah.
It lets certain nutrients inside, but keeps toxins out. And a gradient implies like a buildup of pressure on one side of that boundary versus the other.
That is actually a highly accurate way to visualize it. When we apply that biological concept to global infrastructure, the membrane is the physical boundary of our power grids, our supply chains, or shipping lanes.
Right.
The gradient, that pressure building up against the membrane, is what the sources call velocity mismatch.
Velocity mismatch.
Right. In ordinary language, this is the difference between how quickly modern demand can change and how slowly our physical world can actually adapt. And right now, artificial intelligence is acting as a massive revealer of those boundaries.
So we are dealing with basically a fast layer and a slow layer.
Yes.
The fast layer is the AI boom. You have compute power, billions in capital investment, policy decisions, software updates.
All moving incredibly fast.
Right, like light speed. A tech company can raise $1 billion and just order thousands of GPUs in a matter of weeks. But that fast layer relies entirely on the slow layer, the physical stuff.
Which cannot be downloaded or updated, The slow layer is your power generation plants. It's heavy transmission lines, it's municipal water supplies for cooling those servers.
Which takes a lot of water.
So much water. And it's land acquisition, environmental permitting processes, and crucially, local consent. I mean, you cannot build a nuclear power plant or even just a heavy-duty substation at the speed of a software update.
No, not at all.
So the fast layer is just violently colliding with the physical limits of the slow layer.
I want to dig into a really concrete example from the sources that illustrates this collision perfectly.
Yeah, let's do it.
Look at Texas right now. The state's grid operator actually had to halt new data center grid connection approvals.
Just completely pause them.
Yeah, paused until comprehensive audits could be completed. The backlog of requested power in that queue is a staggering 474 gigawatts.
Which is just a massive number.
To put that in perspective for you, that is more power than the entire country of Germany uses.
Oh, wow.
Right. And roughly 90% of that backlog is AI related.
And if we look at the actual mechanics of those audits in Texas, it reveals exactly how that membrane is functioning.
How so?
Well, they aren't just looking at the sheer volume of electricity. The grid operator is evaluating specific water consumption per megawatt.
Because the servers get so hot.
Exactly. These high-density AI servers require massive amounts of liquid cooling, and, well, Texas is a drought-prone prone state.
Right, water's a serious issue there.
So they are scrutinizing the tax structures to see if the economic benefit actually outweighs the systemic grid strain. They're looking at corporate ownership structures and what these companies are doing to mitigate their impact on the local community.
So it's way more than just plugging in a cord.
Exactly. The sheer velocity of AI expansion has basically forced the grid from being a simple supply mechanism into being a strict investigative gatekeeper.
Okay, so the argument is not simply that AI causes the problem.
Right.
It accelerates contact with limits that were already there.
Exactly.
It's like someone bought a massive fleet of hypercars that's all this sudden AI investment.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right, and they suddenly realize the only way into town is this one-lane dirt road. The hypercars didn't break the road, they just exposed that the road was absolutely not built for that kind of velocity.
No, not at all.
But instead of just complaining about the traffic, the town is now standing at the edge of the road asking the hypercar drivers for their tax returns and water usage plans before letting them drive.
Yeah, and the friction on that dirt road becomes totally impossible to ignore. And it creates hidden costs, what the sources refer to as silence detection.
What does that mean, silence detection?
It means we see the billions invested in AI chips instantly on the stock market.
Right.
That's loud.
Yeah, that's headline news everywhere.
But what we don't see as quickly, because it operates in the slow layer, is the accumulating cost of land, the required grid reinforcement, the heat exhaust management, the sheer human capital needed to make those chips function.
That's the silent part.
Exactly. Those costs aren't priced into the market at the same speed, but they eventually force a structural shift in how resources are allocated.
Which brings us to the shift happening across the board. Because AI exposed these physical boundaries in the power sector, we are seeing a broader global transition.
A massive one, yeah.
We are moving away from resource scarcity and heading straight into access scarcity.
Moving from simply having a resource to actually being able to use it.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see three grounded examples in the research where physical availability simply does not equal usable capacity.
Okay, let's walk through those.
Well, we already dissected electricity in Texas, right? The electrons technically exist.
Right, the power is there.
The capability to generate power exists. But your usable access to that power depends entirely on regional acceptance, passing the audits, and having enough water.
Right. The physical resource is practically useless to a tech company without the approved pathway to get to it.
Exactly.
And you can apply that exact same logic to global shipping, which is fascinating.
Oh, yeah. The maritime examples are wild.
Let's look at the Strait of Hormuz. Physically, the sea lane is right there. It is not evaporated.
No.
The water is just as deep as it was 10 years ago. But actual passage through it is increasingly becoming what the sources call a conditional logistics OS, like an operating system.
Yes.
It's no longer just a binary question of, is the strait open or closed? The pathway itself has been layered with complex conditions.
Yeah, and we saw this play out in the negotiations back in early August between Iran, Oman, and the United States.
I remember reading about this.
Those discussions weren't just about unlocking a gate and letting ships pass. Iran was seeking active management rights and total visibility over the vessels moving through the strait.
They wanted to know exactly who was there.
Exactly. They were negotiating authorization protocols, insurance validations, vessel nationality clearances, and military conditions.
Wow.
So the physical ocean is free, but the software of passage, the insurance premiums, the tracking systems, the diplomatic clearances, that acts as a highly restrictive membrane.
It's not a free-flowing ocean anymore. I mean, it's basically a heavily militarized checkpoint.
It really is.
And for our third example, let's look underground at critical minerals, because this one shows how access scarcity changes the economy itself.
This one is huge for supply chains.
Yeah, so the Democratic Republic of the Congo recently banned the export of copper and cobalt concentrate.
Right.
Now, they aren't saying they won't sell the copper.
No, they definitely want to sell it.
Right. They are just saying you can't just dig up the raw dirt and ship it to a refinery in another country anymore. They want to force foreign companies to build the processing and smelting facilities domestically inside the DRC.
And that makes total sense from their perspective, right? Because the physical copper is abundant, but the DRC is recognizing that just possessing the raw mineral is no longer enough to generate true economic leverage.
Right. Just having the dirt isn't the power anymore.
Exactly. Real supply capacity depends on controlling the processing, the refining, and the export rules. And we see developed nations making the exact same pivot, by the way.
Really? Like who?
Well, the U.S. is advancing policies right now to severely limit the outflow of critical mineral scrap. Things like electronic waste from old servers and smartphones.
Oh, they want to keep the old batteries and circuit boards at home.
Yes, because there is often more concentrated gold and copper in a ton of recycled iPhones than in a ton of raw ore mined from the earth.
Oh, wow. That's crazy to think about.
It's true. The sources refer to this as a shift toward resource loop sovereignty.
Resource loop sovereignty.
Yeah. The old operating system viewed electronic waste as garbage, just a liability to be shipped away to developing nations and completely forgotten.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind.
But the new operating system reclassifies that waste as strategic feedstock.
Strategic feedstock.
That completely changes the evaluation function of the resource. By keeping the recycling loop sovereign, the U.S. isn't just securing a resource, it's securing the pathway to refine and reuse that resource indefinitely.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. Because if you combine these three things, the Texas power grid audits, the Strait of Hormuz insurance checkpoints, and the domestic processing of critical minerals, it tells us that the old geopolitical map is completely obsolete.
It's dead.
Power isn't just owning the copper mine or the oil well or having a massive fleet of cargo ships anymore. Power is owning the refining facility, the recycling system, the data center audits, and the transport infrastructure.
What's fascinating here is that the scarce resource may increasingly be the pathway that turns a physical resource into usable capacity.
The pathway is the real asset.
Yeah. And if the pathway is the actual prize, then we have fundamentally shifted from an era of unconditional free-flowing connectivity to an era of highly conditional access.
And if pathways are the new scarce resource, I mean, it's just basic human nature that someone is going to start guarding them.
Oh, absolutely.
Which leads us to the concept of gate formation. The sources call this the transition gradient field, or TGF.
Right.
If the MGF was the pressure building up, the TGF is the new set of operating rules that emerge when that pressure gets just way too high to ignore.
Yes, when the mismatch between the fast layer and the slow layer becomes intolerable, the infrastructure essentially regrounds itself. Access shifts from being a presumed right.
Like the old assumption of, hey, I built a massive factory, so of course the local utility will hook me up to the power grid.
Exactly. It shifts from that presumed right to a granted privilege. And it's a privilege based on meeting highly specific, often really burdensome conditions.
There's a huge mindset shift.
Massive.
The sources point to Australia to illustrate this transition gradient field in action. There's a strong regulatory push there for new data centers to rely on renewable, self-powering solutions.
Right.
It's no longer acceptable to just plug into the state grid and draw down massive amounts of public energy.
No, the grid can't handle it.
The responsibility for generating that power is being forcefully pushed onto the demand side. If a tech giant wants to use the energy for their fast layer AI models, they have to help create that energy on the slow layer.
It is an attempt to force the fast-moving players to internalize the costs they have historically always externalized.
Right.
For decades, the global economy was built on connectivity maximization.
Just connect everything.
Connect as many supply chains, data centers, and trade routes as possible, as fast as possible. But the transition gradient field represents a shift toward connectivity governance.
Meaning what, exactly?
Deciding which connections are sustainable to allow, which to restrict, and demanding that private entities absorb some of the systemic load they create.
So what does this all mean? I kind of have to play devil's advocate here for a second, because while this sounds very responsible on paper, the reality feels much messier.
It is definitely messy, yeah.
If everyone starts building their own gates, whether it's Texas demanding complex water audits, or Australia demanding data centers build their own solar farms, or the DRC banning unrefined exports, doesn't that just fracture the entire global system?
It certainly adds a lot of friction.
It sounds like we're moving from a global freeway where commerce and data can just drive freely to a system where you have to stop, show your papers, and pay a massive toll at every single intersection.
That is a very valid concern, and it accurately describes what the pressure of this transition looks like on the ground for businesses. The friction increases dramatically.
Yeah.
But the alternative, basically letting the fast layer continuously burn out the slow layer without any gates at all, results in systemic collapse.
Like what we see with rolling blackouts.
Exactly. Rolling blackouts, totally depleted aquifers, or entirely broken supply chains. The toll booths, as you call them, are the system's defense mechanism.
Okay, that makes sense. The system is defending itself. But the sources are also very clear that we have to watch out for something called capture risk, which introduces this massive gray zone into this whole theory.
Yes, the gray zone is where it gets really complicated.
Right, because are these gates actually forcing companies and nations to act responsibly, or is this just a dressed-up version of hoarding?
This brings us to the unresolved split between systemic responsibility and resource enclosure. The framework calls this a pseudo-TGF.
Pseudo, like fake.
Exactly. Sometimes an action looks like it's creating a responsible new operating rule to protect the system, but it's actually just old-fashioned power consolidation by whoever happens to control the pathway.
Let's use the data center power example again to really illustrate this.
Okay.
The sources note that in the U.S., some major tech giants are looking to build dedicated gas power plants or even small modular nuclear reactors right next to their data centers.
Yes, to power them directly.
Right. The goal is to bypass the constraints of the public grid entirely. Now, wait a minute. From one angle, you could say, great, they are generating their own power. They aren't burdening the public grid.
Which sounds very responsible.
It does. But from another angle, if a tech giant just buys up land, water rights, and natural gas pipelines to power a private facility, they aren't helping the public infrastructure at all.
No, they're just pulling resources out of the public pool.
Right. They're just opting out. That's not systemic responsibility. That's just a VIP lane for the ultra-rich.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? Because from the outside, responsibility and exclusion can look absolutely identical.
Yeah.
Building your own private power plant relieves the public grid of your massive demand, which looks highly responsible. But as you pointed out, it also means a highly profitable private growth engine has just enclosed crucial physical resources strictly for its own use.
Entirely outside of public governance.
Exactly.
Right. And you can apply that exact same lens to our other examples. Look at the DRC. If they ban raw mineral exports, is the government truly building domestic economic capacity, creating high-paying smelting jobs, and fostering a healthy processing industry for its citizens?
That would be the responsible view.
But is the state just weaponizing its resource sovereignty to create a bottleneck, purely to squeeze more money out of foreign buyers without actually improving the local infrastructure?
Exactly. And in the Strait of Hormuz, if a new set of management rules and tracking visibility is implemented for shipping, does that make the logistics pathway safer and more resilient for global trade?
Or does it merely institutionalize the military dominance of the nation acting as the gatekeeper?
Exactly.
It's wild because the physical action is exactly the same either way. A gate goes up, the membrane thickens.
A gate goes up,
Yeah.
but the meaning of the gate changes entirely based on what happens next. If the DRC export ban leads to actual repeatable processing capacity and wealth generation inside the country, that is a true shift in the operating system. It fundamentally changes how the global supply chain works for the better of that nation.
But if it's just a temporary squeeze for better prices while the underlying infrastructure remains broken,
then it's a pseudo-TGF. It's just traditional resource nationalism.
so how do we know the difference? I mean, if responsibility and hoarding look exactly the same from a distance, how do you and I, watching the news, tell if a gate is a genuine attempt to manage a shared pathway, or if it's just a VIP toll booth?
The critical metric to watch going forward isn't whether a boundary was formed.
Because we know they're forming.
Right, we know the boundaries are forming. The sheer velocity mismatch between AI development and physical infrastructure practically guarantees it.
So what's the metric?
The metric to watch is who the burden was shifted to once that gate closed.
Say more about that.
Well, when the rules change, whose costs go up? When a tech giant builds a private gas plant, does that lower the community's energy burden, or does it basically hoard all the local natural gas supply, driving up heating costs for the surrounding neighborhoods?
Wow.
And with shipping, who gains veto power over the shipping lane? Is the cost of maintaining the infrastructure shared, or is the public absorbing the downsides like environmental impact and depleted resources, while private entities just enclose all the benefits?
You have to follow the burden to see the truth. That really reframes the whole landscape. Let's trace the arc of what we've unpacked today, because we've covered a lot of ground.
We really have.
We started by looking at how the explosive fast layer speed of AI is crashing into the slow layer physical reality of power grids, water supplies, and committing processes.
That velocity mismatch.
Right. That collision, that membrane pressure, showed us that the world is moving away from the era of free, unconditional connectivity. We are entering an era of access scarcity, where the pathways, The permission to connect to a grid, the ability to refine a mineral, the clearance to ship through a strait, those are the ultimate prize.
And because those pathways are so incredibly valuable, gates are forming. Access is shifting from a presumed right to a granted privilege.
Yeah.
But as we discussed, we have to be incredibly careful about analyzing these gates. We cannot blindly assume that every new rule or private infrastructure project is a responsible attempt to stabilize the system.
Right. Some gates are just enclosures dressed up as responsibility.
Exactly.
We set a mission at the beginning of this deep dive that we wouldn't give you a tidy, wrapped in a bow conclusion, and we meant it. We aren't saying this shift toward conditional access is inevitably a good thing that will save the grid or inherently a bad thing that will ruin global trade.
It is simply the new reality of the infrastructure around us.
Which leaves us with the most important unresolved question moving forward.
Which is, if the physical resources themselves aren't the primary constraint, but rather the pathways required to use them, is usable connectivity itself becoming a scarce resource?
And if connectivity and permission are the new scarce resources, what happens to the smaller players? What happens to the mid-sized startups, the developing nations, or even individual citizens who simply can't afford to build their own private gas power plants or negotiate their own sovereign supply chains?
That is the big question.
As these gates go up everywhere, are we heading toward a world split strictly between those with an all-access pass to the global economy and those permanently locked outside the gates? It is a massive shift to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning the infrastructure around you.